At one point, certain food brands truly stood out in the minds of shoppers. They were seen as symbols of quality and even a bit of prestige, which made people perfectly happy to spend a little more to bring them home. Over time, though, that loyalty has faded. Today, many customers barely give these brands a second glance as they move down the aisle. Some have slipped into obscurity, others price themselves out of reach, and a few simply no longer match modern tastes or expectations. Let's kick things off with a mustard that strutted around like it was wearing a tuxedo in a grocery aisle full of ketchup spills. For a long time, Grey Poupon dominated store shelves, thanks to its elegant glass jars that made plain yellow mustard seem downright uncultured by comparison. This Dijon brand successfully persuaded Americans that real sophistication meant buying imported French mustard that cost 3 times as much as the basic stuff. It was treated like the Rolls-Royce of sandwich spreads, though, amusingly, it still ended up slathered on bologna sandwiches throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Owning Grey Poupon was a quiet signal that you'd made it in life. Television ads leaned hard into that image, showing wealthy people riding in luxury cars and offering up Grey Poupon as if it were some kind of culinary treasure. The packaging did a lot of the work. Thick glass jars with refined labels looked worlds apart from the plastic squeeze bottles used by cheaper competitors. But then a new generation of shoppers came along, one that never saw those iconic commercials that framed Grey Poupon as a status symbol. To them, it was just an overpriced mustard sitting next to store brands that tasted nearly the same for half the cost. And honestly, when you're putting mustard on a hot dog, it's hard to tell which one is supposed to be luxury. Generic Dijon mustards started popping up everywhere, offering similar flavors without the inflated price tag. As food trends shifted toward practicality and value instead of perceived elegance, the brand began to lose its footing. Over time, Grey Poupon stopped being a staple and turned into more of a novelty. Something interesting to notice, but not something most people felt they needed in their fridge. Another beverage brand was heading straight into trouble as shoppers started paying closer attention to health and safety. Odwalla exploded onto the health food scene in 1980, selling brightly colored juices that promised to turn everyday people into shining examples of perfect nutrition. Born in California, the company rolled out drinks with bold names like Green Machine and Superfood, making plain old orange juice seem like nothing more than sugary filler. The bottles themselves looked intense, as if they were filled with liquefied vegetables that had earned advanced degrees. Odwalla aimed squarely at health-conscious customers who didn't mind paying triple the price for drinks loaded with vitamins, supplements, and exotic ingredients. In 2001, Coca-Cola jumped in, buying the company for $300 million after deciding that healthy beverages were the next big thing. But the brand's image didn't hold up under scrutiny. Odwalla ran into repeated contamination issues that clashed badly with its wellness-focused identity. Several recalls hurt consumer trust, including a serious E. coli outbreak in 1996 that sent dozens of people to the hospital. While the company marketed its juices as a path to vitality and longevity, harmful bacteria were apparently getting an all-access pass into production. Those safety failures exposed a major contradiction at the heart of the brand. Customers who were paying premium prices for pure and natural juice started questioning whether fresh and unpasteurized was really worth the risk. As sales slid and newer, cold-pressed juice companies captured the market, Coca-Cola eventually pulled the plug. By 2020, Odwalla was discontinued completely, closing the chapter on a brand that once claimed to bottle health itself. Another throwback drink was also fighting an uphill battle to reclaim the spotlight it once owned. Back in the early 1990s, Clearly Canadian ruled school cafeterias with its unmistakable teardrop-shaped bottles, making plain bottled water seem painfully dull by comparison. This Canadian import managed to convince American teenagers that sipping flavored sparkling water was not only cool, but downright classy. The bottle design did most of the heavy lifting. Its unique shape made it feel less like a beverage and more like a fashion statement you carried around all day. At lunch tables, students proudly set those bottles out like badges of honor, while everyone else drank from forgettable plastic containers. With flavors like wild cherry and packaging that looked too nice to toss, the brand positioned itself as a premium, stylish alternative to standard sodas. Of course, teenage trends move fast. By the early 2000s, Clearly Canadian's cool factor had evaporated as newer sparkling water brands rolled in with fresher flavors and lower prices. What once felt sleek and futuristic started to look dated, about as cutting edge as a flip phone. Eventually, the company shut down entirely. In 2015, a successful crowdfunding campaign revived the brand, proving just how powerful nostalgia can be when it comes to marketing. But the revival didn't last long. Within a few years, the shelves were once again crowded with modern sparkling waters that offered better value, easier to use packaging, and more variety. In the end, clearly Canadians struggled to stand out in a market that had moved on without it. Celebrity chef Wolfgang Puck tried to bring his high-end restaurant reputation into supermarket aisles by launching a line of premium canned soups, all promising restaurant-quality flavor without leaving home. These weren't meant to be everyday pantry staples. The soups arrived in sleek, upscale packaging and featured gourmet ingredients that made standard Campbell's cans look almost embarrassing by comparison. Honestly, the cans looked so refined you half expected to need a reservation just to pop the lid. Each option leaned hard into sophistication, with flavors like organic butternut squash or free-range chicken blended with herbs, all priced at roughly double what most canned soups cost. Thanks to Wolfgang Puck's name, the line immediately gained credibility with food lovers who associated him with culinary excellence and refined taste. But reality set in pretty quickly. Shoppers learned that a celebrity label doesn't automatically make canned soup taste better. Slapping a famous chef's face on a can doesn't turn it into five-star cuisine any more than adding racing stripes turns a bicycle into a motorcycle. Most people agreed the soups were fine, but not noticeably better than cheaper options sitting right next to them. The bigger problem was positioning. The soup aisle is largely split between budget shoppers hunting for the lowest price and customers who prefer fresh, homemade-style soups. Wolfgang Puck's canned offerings landed awkwardly in between. They were too expensive for bargain hunters, yet not fresh or special enough to win over premium buyers, leaving them stuck in a no-man's land with nowhere to really belong. Even long-standing cheese brands were starting to realize that a familiar name no longer guaranteed loyalty. Cracker Barrel cheese had built its reputation on premium cheddar blocks and specialty varieties that sold for noticeably more than standard supermarket cheese. To make things even more confusing, the brand had absolutely no connection to the Cracker Barrel restaurant chain, leaving plenty of shoppers wondering why a company known for comfort food suddenly appeared to be in the upscale cheese business. The name mix-up caused more confusion than identical twins showing up in matching costumes. The cheese line leaned heavily into aged cheddars and artisan-style offerings, all wrapped in sleek black packaging meant to signal refinement and higher quality. Customers were willing to pay extra, assuming that the polished presentation and recognizable name translated into better flavor and texture than ordinary cheese. For a long time, that approach worked. Cracker Barrel carved out a comfortable niche as a mid-range premium brand, clearly better than mass-market options but still cheaper than imported specialty cheeses. That balance held up back when grocery stores offered limited cheese selections. But the dairy aisle didn't stay small forever. As supermarkets expanded, they filled shelves with specialty cheeses from local producers and authentic imports from Europe. Almost overnight, Cracker Barrel found itself in a full-blown cheese Olympics, competing against brands that had been perfecting their craft for years. Compared to these truly premium options, Cracker Barrel's positioning began to feel forced and overpriced. Pressure also came from the other direction. Store-brand cheeses improved dramatically while keeping their prices low, squeezing Cracker Barrel from below. Shoppers looking to save money realized that generic cheddar tasted nearly the same while costing about half as much. Caught between better premium cheeses and cheaper alternatives, the brand struggled to justify its place in the modern cheese aisle. European water brands were about to discover that consumer tastes don't stay frozen in time. Perrier, the famous French sparkling mineral water, once stood as the gold standard of European elegance in American homes and restaurants throughout the 1980s and 1990s. It persuaded an entire generation that sipping fizzy water from a slim green glass bottle was the ultimate sign of refinement and cultural awareness. Ordering Perrier at a restaurant felt like putting on a French accent without saying a word. It instantly made you feel polished and worldly, even if you had no clue why. At the time, Perrier dominated the U.S. sparkling water scene, back when most people thought carbonated water existed mainly as a mixer for alcohol. The brand flipped that idea by positioning itself as a healthy, upscale alternative to soda. aimed at people who wanted to look both health-conscious and sophisticated. Those iconic green bottles became visual status symbols. People proudly set them out at dinner parties or business meetings as a quiet signal that they appreciated the finer things. The French mineral water mystique convinced customers to pay premium prices for what was, at its core, bubbly water with a luxury backstory. Then the market changed fast. The sparkling water aisle exploded with new options Perrier never anticipated. Brands like La Croix rolled out flavored sparkling waters in bright, modern aluminum cans, attracting younger consumers who cared more about flavor than old-world prestige. While Perrier was still selling an image of class, competitors were busy making sparkling water that actually tasted like something other than expensive tap water. Environmental concerns added another problem. As shoppers became more aware of packaging waste and the carbon footprint of shipping heavy glass bottles from France, Perrier's appeal began to fade. Locally produced sparkling waters in lightweight, recyclable cans started to feel like smarter, more responsible choices for eco-conscious consumers. In a market that now valued taste, sustainability, and price, tradition alone was no longer enough to stay on top. Italian sodas were running into trouble as attitudes around health and convenience began to shift. San Pellegrino fruit sodas entered American grocery stores with the swagger of an Italian luxury sports car, packaged in slim cans topped with shiny foil lids that turned opening a drink into a small ritual. These sparkling beverages came in flavors like aranciata and lemonada, names that sounded far more glamorous than plain orange or lemon soda. Those foil tops made each can feel like a little gift you bought for yourself, even if the surprise inside was essentially pricey soda, speaking with an Italian accent. The brand leaned heavily into its image, presenting itself as a premium alternative to everyday soft drinks by highlighting Italian heritage and small-batch, artisanal-style production. Restaurants were especially happy to stock San Pellegrino, since they could charge noticeably more than for regular soda, while offering customers something that felt upscale without involving alcohol. The Italian branding worked wonders for a while. Americans tend to associate Italy with great food, elegant design, and refined taste, and San Pellegrino benefited from all of that cultural goodwill. Flavors like blood orange and bitter lemon genuinely stood out from typical American sodas, drawing in customers who wanted something a little more adventurous. Over time, though, several trends began working against the brand. Health-conscious consumers started cutting sugary drinks altogether, regardless of how fancy the packaging looked or where the recipe came from. It turns out Italian sugar adds calories just as efficiently as American sugar, even if it does so with more style. The smaller sizes, once seen as charming and refined, began to feel skimpy when competing brands offered larger portions for similar prices. Even the details that once made San Pellegrino feel special started becoming drawbacks. The foil lids were mildly annoying to open and created extra waste, something environmentally aware shoppers increasingly wanted to avoid. Meanwhile, newer sparkling drink brands were rolling out wider flavor selections, lower sugar options, and simpler, more practical packaging. In a market moving toward health, value, and convenience, elegance alone wasn't enough to keep San Pellegrino on top. Frozen meal companies were learning the hard way that sounding healthy takes more than slapping the word organic on the box. Amy's Kitchen started out in 1987 as a small, family-run business with a genuinely solid mission: make organic frozen meals that actually tasted like real food, not cardboard drowned in sauce. At the time, that was a big deal. Most frozen dinners were filled with mystery meats and enough artificial ingredients to survive the next ice age. For years, Amy's stood out as the thoughtful option. It was like the friend who showed up to a potluck with something homemade while everyone else brought store-bought potato salad. The brand earned deep loyalty from health-conscious shoppers who were thrilled to find vegetarian and organic meals in regular grocery stores. Yes, the meals cost more than standard frozen dinners, but customers felt good paying extra for a company that appeared to share their values around sustainable farming and nutritious eating. Amy's positioned itself perfectly for busy people who wanted convenient food without betraying their dietary principles. Over time, the name became almost synonymous with high-quality organic frozen meals, especially among shoppers willing to pay a premium for ingredients they could actually pronounce. Then things started to shift. As Amy's grew more popular, Prices steadily climbed while portion sizes seemed to quietly shrink. By 2025, many of their frozen meals were priced above $7, which made them more expensive than eating at some casual restaurants. Paying that much for a frozen dinner began to feel like buying a movie ticket just to watch someone else's home videos. Quality issues also started popping up in customer reviews. People complained about uneven flavors, smaller servings, and occasional cooking problems, all of which chipped away at Amy's long-standing reputation for reliability. At the same time, competitors entered the market with their own organic frozen meals at noticeably lower prices. Those newer options proved that healthy, convenient food didn't have to come with a price tag as steep as Amy's, leaving longtime fans to question whether the brand was still worth the cost. Early pioneers in plant-based desserts eventually ran into the downside of being first. Tofutti carved out a meaningful place in food history by realizing, long before most companies, that people with dairy allergies or vegan lifestyles still wanted ice cream, cream cheese, and all the familiar treats everyone else enjoyed. Back in the 1980s, the brand began using soy as the foundation for frozen desserts and dairy substitutes, at a time when plant-based milk was practically unheard of in American kitchens. Tofutti was like the person who built the first airplane while everyone else was still debating whether humans should even leave the ground. For nearly 20 years, the company dominated the dairy-free dessert space simply because there was no real competition. Their ice cream sandwiches and frozen treats showed up in health food stores and a handful of mainstream supermarkets, finally giving people with dietary restrictions something more exciting than fruit sorbet or frozen juice bars. Over time, the brand name itself became shorthand for dairy-free desserts. An entire generation of vegans, lactose-intolerant shoppers, and health-conscious consumers associated Tofutti with their first taste of non-dairy indulgence. The products weren't perfect, but they solved a real problem at a moment when no one else was trying. The trouble came later. Tofutti made a costly strategic mistake by standing still, while the rest of the industry surged forward. As almond milk, oat milk, and coconut milk grew popular, newer brands started releasing plant-based desserts that tasted noticeably better than anything built on a soy base. While Tofutti was busy celebrating its status as the original, competitors focused on being the best. Big names like Ben & Jerry's entered the dairy-free market with products that closely matched the flavor and texture of traditional ice cream. Suddenly, the soy base that once made Tofutti special became a liability. Consumers discovered that desserts made from other plant ingredients delivered smoother textures and richer flavors, leaving Tofutti behind in a market it once owned. Enhanced water brands were about to discover that scientific-sounding benefits couldn't outweigh growing environmental concerns. Smart Water burst into the crowded bottled water market with a bold promise. Its vapor-distilled water, infused with electrolytes, supposedly delivered better hydration than tap water or standard bottled brands. The company successfully convinced millions of Americans that water wasn't just water, and that smart, health-focused consumers chose enhanced options for peak performance and wellness. The messaging was so effective that plain water began to feel outdated by comparison, like pulling out a calculator in a room full of smartphones. Smart Water was created by Glacio using a vapor distillation process that stripped out impurities and then added back carefully selected electrolytes to improve both taste and hydration. The tall, sleek bottles and clean, minimalist labels reinforced the idea that this wasn't ordinary water. It was hydration with a scientific upgrade. Coca-Cola saw serious potential and acquired Glacio in 2007 for a staggering $4 billion, one of the most expensive purchases ever made in the water category. Throughout the 2000s, celebrity endorsements pushed the brand even further into the spotlight. Well-known actors and athletes appeared in ads suggesting that enhanced water helped fuel their success, adding star power to the science. Then public attitudes shifted. As environmental awareness grew, consumers began questioning the logic of buying water in single-use plastic bottles when clean tap water was freely available and often met the same safety standards. Research showed that most bottled water offered little to no real advantage over municipal supplies, making the premium price harder to defend. This backlash hit Smart Water especially hard. Its core audience tended to be health-conscious and environmentally aware, the very people most likely to notice the contradiction between making healthy choices and contributing to plastic waste. Reusable water bottles became lifestyle accessories, and home filtration systems provided endless clean water without disposable packaging. In the end, no amount of electrolytes could fully counter the growing concern over plastic and sustainability. Breakfast brands were finding out that being healthy on paper doesn't matter much if the food isn't enjoyable to eat. Vans Waffles entered the market with good intentions, introducing whole-grain frozen waffles at a time when most breakfast options were packed with more sugar than a candy bar and enough artificial additives to last forever. The brand presented itself as the smart, nutritious choice for busy families who wanted healthier mornings without committing to homemade breakfasts. Vans positioned itself as the responsible adult in the frozen breakfast aisle, quietly shaking its head while other brands threw sugar-fueled dance parties aimed at kids. Health-conscious parents embraced the brand in the early 2000s, especially as whole grain and gluten-free foods became common fixtures in grocery stores. Vans expanded its lineup with multiple flavors and gluten-free versions, targeting families with dietary restrictions and marketing everything as a clear upgrade over traditional frozen breakfasts. Parents felt genuinely good about serving Vans waffles to their kids. The boxes promised improved nutrition, highlighting whole grain flour, added fiber, and lower sugar as proof that these were smarter choices for starting the day. On paper, it all sounded like exactly what responsible families were supposed to buy. The problem was taste. Vans made a critical misstep by prioritizing health so aggressively that flavor became an afterthought. Eating one of their waffles often felt like doing homework before school. You knew it was supposed to be good for you, but it wasn't exactly enjoyable. Reviews regularly criticized the dry, cardboard-like texture and bland flavor, with many people admitting that standard frozen waffles suddenly seemed delicious by comparison. Kids in particular weren't convinced. Many flat out refused to eat them, leaving parents stuck between sticking to nutrition goals and keeping the peace at breakfast. As competition increased, other brands stepped in with protein-rich waffles that managed to balance healthier ingredients with flavors people actually liked. In the end, Vans learned that no amount of good intentions can save a product if it doesn't taste good. Protein bar brands were learning that health-focused marketing only works when it's backed by real nutritional integrity. Kellogg's rolled out Special K protein bars as a natural extension of its well-known cereal line, aiming squarely at women looking for quick, healthy snacks that supported weight management and active lifestyles. These bars were advertised as high in protein and fiber, all wrapped in chocolate coatings designed to make eating right feel more like a treat than a chore. The messaging went even further, subtly implying that grabbing one of these bars was like carrying a personal nutritionist and fitness coach in your purse. They fit neatly into Special K's larger brand narrative built around portion control, balanced eating, and empowering women to make smart food choices. For busy customers without time for full meals, the bars seemed like an easy, responsible solution. Thanks to Special K's long-standing reputation in the health and wellness space, the protein bars immediately felt trustworthy. Shoppers believed they were choosing guilt-free snacks that could curb sweet cravings while still delivering meaningful nutritional benefits. On the surface, everything lined up with what health-conscious consumers wanted. That confidence didn't last. Nutrition experts eventually started calling out serious inconsistencies between the brand's marketing and the reality of what was inside the wrappers. Despite their wholesome image, the bars contained unexpectedly high amounts of sugar along with artificial additives that clashed with their health-forward positioning. Checking the ingredient list felt a bit like discovering your fitness instructor had been sneaking donuts between training sessions. Legal issues only made things worse. Kellogg's faced lawsuits over misleading health claims and was forced to adjust its advertising to meet federal guidelines, further eroding consumer trust. At the same time, newer protein bar companies entered the market with cleaner ingredients and more transparent messaging. Compared to those newer options, Special K's formula began to feel dated, overly processed, and out of step with what health-focused shoppers now expected. Early leaders in plant-based meat were about to learn that being first doesn't guarantee staying relevant. Boki Burgers helped invent the frozen plant-based meat category all the way back in 1979, long before anyone was talking about modern meat alternatives. Built on soy-based patties, the brand offered vegetarians and health-conscious shoppers their first believable substitute for hamburgers, effectively making Boca the unquestioned authority in a market it had created from scratch. At the time, Boca was revolutionary, like inventing the bicycle in a world where everyone else was still getting around on foot. It changed everything. But as with most early inventions, better technology eventually came along. For nearly 40 years, Bokeh remained on top largely because there was no serious competition. Their burgers showed up in grocery stores everywhere, giving vegetarians a rare source of convenient, meat-free protein when dining options were slim. That long stretch of dominance built strong loyalty. For millions of vegetarians, Bokeh burgers became the default choice for comfort food without animal products. The soy-based recipe delivered decent protein, worked well from the freezer, and could be prepared quickly. Perfect for busy households that just wanted something familiar and easy. Then everything changed around 2018. The plant-based meat revolution exploded, and suddenly Bokeh felt like outdated tech. New companies entered the scene using advanced food science and innovative plant proteins to recreate the taste, texture, and even appearance of real meat. While Bokeh's burgers were still proudly advertising that they were made from vegetables, competitors were engineering vegetables that convinced people they were eating actual beef. What once set Bokeh apart quickly became a weakness. The soy-based formula started to feel inferior as shoppers discovered alternatives made from pea protein, wheat gluten, and other ingredients that delivered far more convincing meat-like experiences. At the worst possible moment, just as the market was bursting with innovation, Bokeh's parent company appeared to stop pushing forward. In a space that was evolving fast, standing still proved to be the biggest mistake of all. Classic cookie brands were finding it harder to justify premium prices as portions shrank and costs climbed. Pepperidge Farm cookies were once seen as the height of packaged cookie sophistication, with refined varieties like Milano and Chessman that made ordinary store-brand cookies feel downright unsophisticated. Between the elegant packaging and European-inspired recipes, the brand convinced generations of Americans that buying these cookies was the closest thing to bringing real bakery quality home from the store. In the cookie aisle, Pepperidge Farm felt like a black tie affair. The cookies were pricey, impressive, and just a little intimidating for casual snackers. During their peak in the early 2000s, families treated them as special occasion desserts, pulling them out for holidays, dinner parties, and gatherings where hosts wanted to signal good taste. The brand earned its premium positioning by emphasizing high-quality ingredients, polished presentation, and flavors that seemed more refined than typical supermarket cookies. At the same time, competition intensified. Artisan cookie brands, local bakeries, and expanded grocery store bakery sections flooded the market with new options. Store-brand versions of popular Pepperidge Farm styles also started appearing on shelves at much lower prices, often delivering nearly the same taste. As alternatives multiplied, it became harder for the brand to convince shoppers that its smaller, pricier cookies were still worth the splurge.
Even well-loved organic brands were learning that a wholesome image can only go so far when prices keep climbing. Annie's started out as a small, independent organic food company with a cheerful bunny mascot and a simple promise: macaroni and cheese made with real cheese and organic ingredients. At the time, that was a big deal. Most kids' foods were packed with artificial colors and preservatives intense enough to glow in the dark. The brand quickly earned a loyal following among parents who wanted healthier versions of familiar comfort foods without giving up taste, convenience, or their kids' enthusiasm. Annie's felt like the friendly neighborhood mom who showed up to every school event with homemade organic snacks, while everyone else brought neon-colored, chemical-heavy treats. That smiling bunny logo became a trust signal for health-conscious families grateful to find organic options in regular grocery stores. Annie's didn't stop at mac and cheese. The company expanded into crackers, fruit snacks, and other kid-friendly staples, offering organic versions of popular foods that children actually enjoyed eating. Parents felt good choosing Annie's because the brand seemed to stand for better nutrition, more ethical food production, and values that aligned with how they wanted to raise their families. Its marketing positioned the company as a kinder alternative to giant food corporations focused on profit over children's health. That perception changed in 2014 when General Mills bought Annie's for $820 million. For many longtime fans, the acquisition felt like watching a beloved independent coffee shop get swallowed up by a massive chain. It might have been good for growth, but the charm didn't feel the same. Price soon became the biggest problem. Annie's products stayed noticeably more expensive than store-brand organic options that offered similar quality. Families started realizing they could buy organic food for their kids without paying the Annie's premium. And most found they didn't miss the brand enough to justify the extra cost. Over time, the bunny logo that once symbolized trust began to feel more like pricey decoration than proof of superior food. Together, these premium food brands showed just how quickly consumer tastes can change, and how difficult it is to stay on top without ongoing innovation and real, tangible value.